This hourly segment is brought to you by the Money Hour radio show, Saturday afternoons at 3 on AM 560, The Answer. Brought to you by Pearshell Financial Group.
See Michelle Malkin, Sean Hannity, and Laura Logan at Freedom Summit 2019. Tickets on sale now at freedomsummitchicago.com.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. And, a lot of focus yesterday on Republicans who are not always the greatest Trump defenders. Will they break bad and provide a real path to removing this president from office? And so, of course, the pronouncement of Mitt Romney on the telephone transcript was seized upon.
I did read the transcript. It remains troubling in the extreme. It's deeply troubling.
What do you do beyond be troubled with it, though?
Well, there's a process that the House is pursuing. The Senate is also looking at the testimony of the whistleblower, so there's an evaluation of gathering more facts.
Let me ask you just directly, do you believe it's now appropriate for the House to begin this inquiry of impeachment?
That's not advice I'm going to be providing to the House or to the Speaker. She is able to do what she feels is right. That's up to her. But at this stage, the process is to continue gathering information. But clearly, what we've seen from the transcript itself is deeply troubling.
Deeply troubling. What is being underreported is some of the consternation Joe and Hunter Biden are inflicting upon Democrats.
Well, reporters are starting to ask a lot of uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren was apparently just asked on the trail, would you allow your son to serve on the board of a foreign company? And she said no. And then she said, well, wait a second. She's realizing what she said. Yeah. Well, let me think about that. I don't know what the right answer is. I have to think about that because I don't know how to triangulate this without being perceived as trying to cut Biden's legs out from underneath him and then make the story about Joe and Hunter rather than having the story be about Trump impeachment and removal from office. So I'll have to get back to you.
And they asked Kamala Harris what she thought about Vice President, helping out his son in foreign land. And she said, the voters will have to decide. Yeah. And then she quickly ran off stage. Yeah. It was so uncomfortable. You could feel the tension, thousands of miles away.
Yeah, that's a real stout defense of Biden there from Kamala. You have, however, had pushback. Mike McCall, the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, along with 18 of his colleagues, signed a letter published in the Wall Street Journal, basically pushing back on this, noting, as did others yesterday, that why even talk about the transcript? Why even talk about the particulars of the whistleblower complaint? This is like the 42nd reason that Democrats have come up with to call for the impeachment and removal of office of President Trump. And on this latest matter, they didn't wait for the transcript or the whistleblower complaint to be made public. So how serious should we really treat their pronouncements? Nonetheless, this is the cloak and dagger intrigue that will dominate our politics for at least the next, a couple weeks. And frankly, with Nancy Pelosi's pronouncement earlier this week, it seems like that's the frame of the 2020 election. And that's in part what Michael Goodwin had to say on the pages of the New York Post. We're pleased to have Michael Goodwin back, New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Thanks for being with us again, Michael. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
So Nancy Pelosi, whether being forced or not, she's essentially thrown down the gauntlet and she's not going to be able to pick it back up. This is what's going to inform 2020 and what the Democrats' value proposition is going to be for the American public, yeah?
Well, I see no way out of this for her now, having made this choice. She commits the party to it, and it's interesting, you're seeing the numbers of Democrats who favor this course soar in the last 48 hours. Until now, it's clearly more than it's almost all of them, 235. The last count I saw was 213 Democrats support an impeachment inquiry, essentially over this phone call. I mean, I think that's what's amazing, that Pelosi did this on the basis, she did it on Tuesday, on the basis of media reports as to what the whistleblower was alleging. And once you see the transcript, it's not nearly as advertised. recall that there were, I think the Wall Street Journal said there were 8 times Trump raised the question of Biden. Well, there weren't. That he had threatened to withhold foreign aid, American foreign aid from Ukraine if he didn't get what he wanted on Biden. Well, that's not there either. So there were no threats about withholding foreign aid. There was no quid pro quo. So what really, in my column, I suggest if Pelosi had held her fire for 24 hours, she might have said, this is not the issue. This is not the thing we can hang impeachment on. We're going to have to find something better. But for reasons almost impossible to explain, she jumped on Tuesday, and now she and the country are stuck with it.
Yeah, you wrote in your article that they could win the battle but lose the war. I love that. And now this unclassified whistleblower document has come out. I'm sure have you had a chance to read it yet? And what are your thoughts?
Well, I have not, but I must say that my understanding of it is that it's based entirely on this one phone call. Now, I don't know if that's correct, but that's what I read. So in that sense, we already know more than the whistleblower. We have the transcript of the phone call.
Yeah.
The whistleblower did not, apparently, the second or third hand, and had a political bias. I mean, gee, where have we heard that before?
Yeah, no, I mean, it reads, with one exception, suggestions from White House officials that this whistleblower allegedly knows spoke with, that there was unusual steps taken to cordon off the transcript from the July 25th call because officials clearly knew the gravity of what President Trump had done. But that's, of course, just his opinion and interpretation of something he suggests, but we don't know. Happened, but otherwise it just reads like a 9-page New York Times op-ed.
Yeah. It strikes me too something else, guys, and that is we're looking at this transcript of this call as though, oh my God, look what he said and did. And, it occurred to me, we have nothing to compare it to. Have you ever before seen a transcript of a presidential call with a foreign leader?
No.
I haven't.
Wow.
It's very rare, and Trump took this extraordinary step. In order to provide the transparency, he thinks he did nothing wrong, and that's why he released it. And it was interesting. Last night, some people on Twitter saying, "Okay, let's see a transcript of Obama's calls with Iran about the nuclear deal. Let's see what Biden said on the phone to Ukraine." Let's do that for everybody now. Let's throw it all out there. Let's see what Bill Clinton was saying. Let's see what George Bush was saying to the leaders of Iraq. I mean, just think of the can of worms we could open here.
Well, go ahead.
We would have a better frame to compare the nature of these kinds of calls.
I also don't like so many people are starting from the premises of the left. The idea that even if there was an implicit quid pro quo that was being pushed, I'm sorry, and so what? Where is quid pro quo illegal found in federal statutory law or constitutional law? I mean, this is the matter, of course, of politics. The Pollyannish nature of some of the reactions to the idea that you're applying pressure to a foreign country to get what you want out of it. In addition to this idea that because Joe Biden is a presidential candidate, that everything he does is off limits for investigation. I'm sorry, is that the standard? Because I remember a presidential candidate that was under FBI investigation not so long ago. He's the president of the United States now. So I'm a little confused as to hear what the standards are and what the laws or the protocols or the norms are that are supposed to be so wildly broken here.
Well, and who's setting those standards, right? Who's making these rules that Donald Trump violates every time he opens his mouth? I mean, that's, someone said the other day, and it struck me as something I hadn't thought of. So the moment of the hot mic between Barack Obama and Medvedev, where he says, tell Vladimir, I'll have more flexibility after the election. This is in 2012, before the election. And someone said, well, isn't he implicitly asking Putin for a favor? Isn't he asking Putin to give him time until the election is over and then he can make a deal? Isn't that asking for help from a foreign leader, Putin nonetheless? So I just think that if we're going to, as you say, Dan, use these standards, let's make it one standard across the board. But of course, that's not what the media is about. And we expect this from the Democrats. This is what the opposition party, I think it's extreme, but this is what opposition parties generally do. But what we don't expect is for the referee to be crooked. We don't expect the people calling balls and strikes to be wearing secretly the uniform of one team. And this is what we're faced with in this country. So much of the information that the public is being fed is poisoned by bias. And it's not always clear, I think, to the consumers that you are being fed a crock because the person feeding it to you has an agenda, wants you to believe what they believe, and so they're giving you their side of the story. And I think that is what we must always come back to and remember. What is the other side of the story? You're not getting it from most of the mainstream media.
So do you think there's any chance that Pelosi will change her mind? I mean, are they going to have a formal House vote on this?
Well, your second point, I think, Amy, is the real test here, because what she did was avoid the vote at this point, so that people don't have to go on the record saying they favor an official inquiry. It is apparently not required, but there are certain powers that come with that. As Doug Collins, one of the House Republicans, was saying, it sets its own rules in terms of subpoena power, in terms of the minority party's ability to do things, so that by not taking that vote, she protects the members who are in these swing districts, and she acts as though she's just kind of thrown it out there. But look, I think the die is cast. I think there were Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her ilk are now more important in the Democratic Party, that Nancy Pelosi surrendered to them by doing this. Now, look, that's the difficulty of being a legislative leader. You have professional politicians with their own constituents who you're trying to herd them together, and sometimes they just won't be herded. And so Pelosi is now a follower of AOC and the squad and all of those the impeachment caucus. And so I think everything in the Democratic Party is going to be about impeachment. Anybody who wants to run a primary against a member of the Democratic Party, the way to do it is to run on the left, is to say, I'm for impeachment, and the person in that job now is soft on impeachment, I'm harder on impeachment. The presidential candidates are all going to have to be for it. This is the consequence that Pelosi has created with her surrender.
And it's interesting, too, because she's not completely in control of this process. And most specifically, you have John Durham, the U.S. attorney selected by AG Barr to do a look back at 2016. And part of that look back in 2016 includes a look back at what was going on in Ukraine in 2016. And John Solomon and others have reported in great detail that a lot of what was going on in Ukraine in 2016 was about Democrat collusion with the Ukrainian government that had nothing to do with Joe Biden, but it certainly doesn't cast the Democrats in a positive light either. So this could have the effect of boomeranging on them, just as, to a large extent, the Mueller investigation did.
We hope so, because, I mean, those of us who believe that we should have a single standard here would like to see these things opened up. Biden, of course, look, I think the Biden thing smells to high heaven.
Yeah.
And I believe it will be the knockout punch of his candidacy at some point. But I think it's even bigger than that, because did the press not know about his son's? Think of this.
The other way.
His son flew to China with him on Air Force Two and signed a deal getting a $1.5 billion investment from a Chinese government entity, effectively, for his investment fund. And this is okay? I don't think so. And so I think for Joe Biden didn't know. Gee, son, why are you coming to China with me?
Well,
they
right.
got
I
off
think
the
he was
plane
out
together.
sightseeing or something.
Well, right, and this is so this is the cynical covering for Biden that's been done in the D.C. press corps this week, most notably by Chuck Todd, where he keeps saying he's exonerated. It was investigated. There was no wrongdoing found.
You don't know what your kids are doing financially. I mean,
Wrongdoing.
Right.
Forget wrongdoing. This is a per se conflict of interest that he knew was a conflict of interest. Should have known. Hunter knew. Should have known. Hunter's not even involved in this based on his lack of experience in the energy sector. If his last name's not Biden, and all he had to do to avoid all of this ugliness is recuse himself, but he chose not to do that. And so forget any assertions of criminal wrongdoing. It's a conflict of interest. It was unethical conduct by the Vice President of the United States, and the D.C. press corps just wants to paper over that.
Right. Again, it's one standard for Democrats and a different standard for Republicans, and really a third standard for Trump, because he is the consummate evil who must be destroyed at any cost. And just as we're talking about Biden being a casualty of this jihad against Trump, I think the FBI has become a casualty for the same reasons, because the way Jim Comey corrupted it with Andrew McCabe and Strzok and Page, et cetera. I think the New York Times has become a casualty of the hate Trump mentality, because it has lost all credibility among those who are looking for fairness. So I think this desire to destroy Donald Trump has corrupted major institutions in America that we need to count on. We need a trustworthy FBI. We need a trustworthy media. We don't have either right now. And I think this is a great tragedy of our age, and there will be consequences for years and years, if not decades, because once we lose trust in these big premier institutions, A, there's no substitute in the short term, and B, it's very hard for society to function if there's no trust. If there aren't things we can rally around, if there aren't institutions that we can look at and say, yes, they are speaking for the common good, they are speaking with even hand and good intentions, where are those institutions now? I mean, they have been destroyed from within, and they have not been replaced. I think this is the great crisis of our age.
Well, right, and don't you think that is a fait accompli, at least for the 2020 cycle? Because whoever wins, if Trump wins, it's going to be he colluded with the Russians, he colluded with Ukrainians, lawlessness, anarchy, dictatorship. And if whatever socialist they nominate wins, it's going to be conservatives, Republicans, Trump supporters saying big media and big tech conspired with whoever their nominee is to subvert the will of the people.
Sure. Look, remember when Hillary Clinton said in 2016 that it was appalling, I think it was in the third presidential debate, when Trump said he wouldn't necessarily agree to not contest the results of the election.
Right.
Clinton was appalled by this. The New York Times, everybody, oh my God, we've never had that. Americans always trust the outcome. Well, here we are. Who has contested the outcome of 2016? Only the left. And so do we think that if Donald Trump loses in 2020, he will not contest? Do we think those 60 or 65 or 70 million Trump supporters will quietly accept his defeat? If that's what happens, and if it's decreed by, CBS News and the New York Times and NBC, come on. This is now fair game. Everything, all the rules are being thrown overboard to get the outcome you want. That's what the left has decided they are going to do. And so Joe Biden cheats in Ukraine. Joe Biden's son makes a windfall out of his father's position. We're not going to worry about that. Donald Trump is our worry. So I think that's where we are in this country, and I think we all share the feeling, the conviction that this is not good. This is not healthy. We are in troubled times, and there's no sunlight ahead just yet.
He is Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of nature. Changing the world, one life at a time.